Welcome to The Explainer. So I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today because, well, we're going to look at the world right outside your window in a completely new way. We are diving headfirst into plant morphology. Think of it as this incredible architectural blueprint that's just hidden right in our own backyards. We'll be uncovering the absolute genius of structural engineering that lets flowering plants survive, thrive, and reproduce. Let's get right into it. Here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. First up, we'll meet the pioneer of plant anatomy. Then, we'll dig into roots as our underground foundation. Third, we'll look at stems and solar panels. Fourth, the brilliant architecture of flowers. And finally, we'll wrap up with fruits, seeds, and formulas.
Section 1. The pioneer of plant anatomy. Before we even look at the plants themselves, we really need to look at the human curiosity that built the scientific language we're about to learn.
99. Seriously, 99. That is the age at which Dr. Catherine Esau was still actively, completely dominating the field of plant biology. She was born back in 1898 in Ukraine, and man, she became an absolute titan in understanding exactly how plants are put together. Actually, Peter Raven, he's the director of the Missouri Botanical Garden, he hit the nail on the head when he said she, quote, absolutely dominated the field. Her 1954 book, Plant Anatomy, literally sparked a total revival of the entire discipline. It took this super dynamic, developmental approach to how we understand plant structure. I mean, her work was so incredibly encyclopedic, it basically became the Webster's Dictionary of Plant Biology. She gave us the very vocabulary we use to understand the living world. Moving on to Section 2, Roots, the underground foundation. Let's actually start using some of that vocabulary and kick off our structural tour right at the base, the root system. Now, the word morphology, it simply means the study of gross structural features, both inside and out. And hey, it's super important to remember, this isn't just dry, boring memorization. Morphology is literally the shared vocabulary of naturalists everywhere. It's how we describe the crazy, diverse forms of life on Earth just by using careful observation. So, looking underground, we essentially see two major plumbing styles. On the left here, we have what's called a taproot system. This is really typical of dicotyledonous plants, like your everyday mustard plant. Notice that deep, continuous main axis, that's the primary root, with all those lateral branches shooting off it. Now compare that to the right. Typical of monocots, like wheat, we have a fibrous root system. Here, the primary root is actually pretty short-lived. It gets replaced by this bushy, shallow network of roots that literally originates right from the very base of the stem. But regardless of the style of plumbing, this underground foundation has some absolutely critical jobs. It's absorbing water and minerals from the soil, it's providing proper anchorage so the whole thing doesn't just topple over. It stores reserve food and, get this, it even synthesizes plant growth regulators. So it's not just sitting there, it is a highly active living machine right beneath the soil. Section 3. Stems and solar panels. All right, let's head above ground to explore the structural framing and the energy-gathering solar panels of our plant, the stems and leaves. Developing straight from the plumule of the embryo when a seed germinates, the stem is the ascending axis of the plant. Think of the stem as a giant spacing mechanism. It relies on nodes, which are the exact spots where leaves are born, and internodes, those are the structural portions right between the nodes. This framework is perfectly engineered to spread out branches, leaves, and eventually flowers, basically to maximize their exposure to the environment.
And attached to those nodes, the leaves, the plant's literal solar panels. And just like the roots underground, these leaves have their own distinct wiring systems, known as venation, to transport water and nutrients. Dicots usually use what's called reticulate venation, where the veinlets form this complex, almost messy-looking network. Monocots, on the flip side, typically feature parallel venation. You can see how the veins run neatly right alongside each other within a leaf blade or lamina.
So the really cool part is how the plant actually arranges these solar panels so they don't shade each other out, catching the absolute maximum amount of light. This architectural strategy has a name, phyllotaxy. In an alternate arrangement, like you'd see on a China rose, a single leaf pops out at each node in an alternating pattern. In an opposite arrangement, kind of like a guava plant, a pair of leaves sit directly across from one another at each single node. And then there's the whorled setup, where more than two leaves circle around a single node like a little crown. Section 4. The architecture of flowers. Let's transition to the most vibrant, welcoming facade of our botanical building, the flower. And, fun fact, a flower is actually just a highly modified shoot.
When it's finally time to reproduce, the plant's shoot apical meristem pulls off this brilliant transformation into a floral meristem. The way these flowers are then physically arranged on the axis, that's what we call the inflorescence.
And nature generally relies on two primary blueprints for this arrangement. In a racemose inflorescence, the main axis just keeps on growing, right? And the flowers keep branching off laterally as it goes up, in what's called acropedal succession. But in a cymose inflorescence, the main axis actually terminates in a single flower. That completely caps its growth, so any subsequent flowers have to branch out below it in a basipedal order.
Now let's zoom in on the flower itself. A typical flower is built in 4 distinct layers, or whorls, and they're all mounted on a base called the thalamus. Starting from the very outside, we have the calyx, which is made of those protective leaf-like sepals. Next in is the corolla, made of brightly colored petals to draw in the pollinators. Then we hit the reproductive core, the androecium, containing the male stamens, and right smack in the center, the gynoecium, which holds the female carpels and the ovary.
Now check this out. The physical position of that female ovary actually dictates how we classify the whole flower. On the left, in a hypogynous flower, the ovary sits at the absolute top. It's superior to everything else. In the middle, a paragynous flower has the ovary and all the other parts sitting at roughly the same level around the rim, making it half inferior. And on the far right, the epigynous flower is wild. The thalamus actually grows upward, completely enclosing the ovary. So the other parts sit above it, making the ovary completely inferior. Section 5. Fruits, Seeds, and Formulas. Finally, we're moving to the last stage of the plant's life cycle: packaging, protection, and the mathematical code of the next generation. So once fertilized, that ovary we just talked about develops into a fruit. The wall of the fruit is called the pericarp. Now, if it's a thick, fleshy fruit, say a mango or a coconut, which, by the way, are both classified as drupes, that pericarp has 3 distinct layers. You've got the outer skin, that's the epicarp. The fleshy, delicious middle part of a mango, that's the mesocarp. And that hard, stony pit protecting the seed inside, that's the endocarp.
And tucked safely inside that protective pit is the seed itself. It's literally a dormant embryo just waiting for its big moment. Dicot seeds, like beans or peas, have 2 fleshy cotyledons that store up food for the developing embryonal axis. Monocot seeds, on the other hand, like wheat or maize, typically just have 1 large shield-shaped cotyledon, which we call a scutellum, and they often rely on a completely separate tissue called the endosperm to store their food.
Okay, wow, we have covered roots, stems, leaves, flowers, fruits, and seeds. So the big question becomes, how on earth do botanists summarize all this magnificent, layered complexity into a single, universal code that anyone in the world can understand?
Well, let's see how this all builds into the ultimate botanical shorthand. Scientists actually compress all of that morphological data into a floral diagram and a semi-technical floral formula, kind of like the one you see here for the mustard plant. Just by using specific symbols, this single tiny line of text tells a botanist exactly how many sepals make up the calyx, how many petals are in the corolla, the number of stamens in the androecium, and the exact position and structure of the gynoecium. It's literally an entire scientific language neatly packed onto a single line.
And honestly, that is exactly why studying morphology is so deeply rewarding. The standard technical language, it doesn't just label plants for some dusty textbook. It unlocks the incredible, highly structured diversity of nature. It takes a simple walk in the park and turns it into this amazing exploration of masterfully engineered biological buildings.
So I'll leave you with this one thought today. Armed with the vocabulary of Catherine Essaw and generations of botanists, next time you pull up a weed in your garden, are you going to see just a pesky plant, or will you see a masterclass in architectural survival, perfectly adapted from root to shoot? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, keep observing the amazing world around you.